discussions with different views. Talk about your favorite topics and spread the news. We go from X to Z.
Hey kids, welcome back to From X to Z. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yay!
Yes, so as always, I'm Al Morgan.
And I'm Cal Morgan.
That's right, and we are your hosts for this scintillating cross-generational nerd podcast.
Wow!
Yeah, exactly. Get hyped!
Get hyped!
Yeah.
In fact, get hyped for what we're going to be talking about today. Dad, would you like to introduce the topic that we have on our minds?
Sure, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite Netflix binge, Squid Game.
Squid Game! And we're not talking about Splatoon here, folks. That's been out for how many years at this point? No, that's old news. We're talking about Netflix, baby!
This was indeed not a reboot of the seminal 60s Hanna-Barbera cartoon Squidly Diddly.
They just pulled the rug out from under us. They're like, no, it's a gripping action thriller, K-drama type thing, and
yeah,
there's guns and stuff, and we were like, oh, come on, man.
Come on, people. But it turned out, I think we both agree so far, it turned out to be remarkably good and remarkably affecting. Mm-hmm. I'll just put the disclaimer out there right now, of course, that from here on out, henceforth, massive spoilers.
Yes,
so,
and hopefully for this episode, spoilers for episodes 1 through 6
yes.
only.
Cal has seen episodes 1 through 6. I have seen the entire thing. I binged the entire thing in 24 hours.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so...
Are you okay, mentally? Did you...
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I'm all right. I'm hanging in there, even though this is amazingly traumatizing in some ways. I just can't stop watching it.
Oh my god, and you can't stop thinking about it almost. I don't know about you, but every episode that I watched, and I kind of watched it spread out. I actually did about an episode or two a day.
Yeah.
Until I got to 6. And part of the reason I'm only to 6 is because I'm actually watching it with my girlfriend now, so the two of us are kind of making our way through. But every episode, I found myself hanging on to the plot points of the episode and turning them over in my head and thinking about everything that had happened over and over again, because there's just so much that goes on in this show.
Yeah.
And there's so many layers to both the symbolism of it and not even just the symbolism, but the in-universe implications of what is going on.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I think it's packed pretty well with all of that kind of stuff. Here's where I'm going to introduce a little bit of our famous cross-generational nerd thing, because when I watched it, a lot of it reminded me of other touchstones of dystopian fiction out there, going all the way back to Logan's Run, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
That's
or
the
seen
one they kill them after they're 30, right? And so
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a very post-60s, 70s concept.
Yeah.
And as a side note, the sideburns are tremendous in that movie. I highly recommend you check it out. Just for that.
Listen, the 70s knew what they had going on with the sideburns. They were playing with it. They were having a good time, and I respect that.
They were on point, and I mean that in several meanings of the word. So, no, but, starting from stuff like that, I don't know if you've ever heard of the early 2000s Japanese series Battle Royale.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, with the classroom, absolutely. And that served as kind of a precursor to the Hunger Games, which then became sort of the next. I was going to
name check that as well. So there's definitely tradition here.
Yeah.
They're mining a field which has already been kind of opened up a little bit, but I think that Squid Game does it really so well.
Yeah.
In that even the familiar elements which you see are tweaked in interesting ways, and I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like they really... Something that I like about Squid Game, I've actually thought quite a bit about the parallels between Squid Game and something like the Hunger Games, because, the Hunger Games was sort of the big thing when I was growing up. Everyone read it. We all saw the movies. We all kind of thought J-Law was a weird choice, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about the parallels, and Squid Game to me feels like they are both in their own ways critiques of modern society and critiques of the way that capitalism influences and holds people,
right?
And the extent to which people will be forced to go to live under capitalism or to
Right.
live.
And the disparity between the haves and the have-nots and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. As well as the idea that power can be subverted through certain avenues. Things like a wealth of knowledge, or being sneaky and clever, or even just, having a good heart and being able to kind of compassion your way out of it. And, that being said, I think both of them also show the pitfalls of those things in a way that feels very gritty and realistic. That I like a lot.
Yeah. To your point there, being able to subvert capitalism with a kind of heartfelt emotion or something like that, which you kind of alluded to, I think that almost gets inverted in Squid Game.
Yes.
And I know you haven't seen the entire thing yet.
No, but even, you're right.
It's there are definitely echoes, especially with some of the characters, where it's like, you can do your best, but capitalism is still going to fucking roll over you.
Right.
It's like the system is the system, and sometimes you have to play by the system's rules to make a go of it.
Yeah.
Well, especially with, as we were talking about earlier, with Ali and
Song-woo.
And Song-woo.
Oh my god. We were talking about episode 6, which for anyone who has seen it is an incredibly intense episode.
The Marbles episode, if you don't remember exactly.
Previous episodes had the teams pairing up, getting people into teams. This episode asked our characters to pair up into partners with the expectation that they would be going at this collaboratively, and were then told that their partner would actually be their opponent, and
Their
only one of them would be able to come out alive.
Right. And I always think that's a nice little twist, because it's like, for several of these Squid games, they set people up. They don't actually lie to them.
Right, no.
But they kind of play on their expectations. Like, oh yeah, you're going to partner up and you shake your partner's hand, so obviously this is going to be a cooperative game.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Right. No, and speaking of that, something I wanted to mention with Squid Game that a lot of people have brought up that I think is very interesting is that Squid Game, in comparison to, I would say, a lot of the dystopian novels that we see, gives its players not only an honest, big air quotes are on that, because lies by omission are still a thing, but an honest representation of what they'll be doing, as well as the ability to leave. In fact, they do. In the second episode, the players all vote to leave the game, and over half of them vote. The majority votes. And so that, I thought, was such an interesting point, because despite the fact that they were given the chance to leave and the chance to take it back, they already knew what this was about, and that the Squid Game was going to involve them killing each other, or to not even killing each other, but there would be an element of death involved.
Right.
They still chose to return, because it's the...
That was one of the most interesting plot devices, I thought, because that's not something that's really been done before, but I think it's definitely to the theme of how modern society / capitalism might not leave you with a lot of choices sometimes, in that is, even though they say you're volunteering for it, you only have so much agency in terms of your own destiny.
Right.
And sometimes you wind up taking a shitty choice because that's the least shitty choice available.
Right. Absolutely.
And people can argue about whether that was well done or whether it was a little bit heavy-handed, but that's not a kind of plot twist I've seen in these kind of dystopian sci-fi things before, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
I thought it was
absolutely.
Really good.
In fact, I think just in general, the motivations behind the big bad, which of course you've seen the whole show and I have not, so I can't speculate for sure, but what I will say is that up until this point, there's been a really heavy focus on things like equality and making sure that the game is played with a certain amount of rule following.
Yes.
And that is something that we see subverted through this kind of organ harvesting arc, where they have these folks who are actively taking the players' bodies and stealing their organs.
And I got to ask you, as far as that's concerned, have you seen the conclusion of the organ harvesting arc yet?
Presuming it's them getting strung up like a candelabra up in the ceiling, then yes.
So you've gotten to that point. Yeah. One thing which I thought was interesting, and again, you could either judge it as heavy-handed or, good.
Yeah.
Is the leader, the captain,
yes,
making the speech about how what really disturbed him is the fact that these organ harvesters disturbed the egalitarian nature of the game. And of course, that's utterly ironic because as much as they're trying to put on this facade, and maybe the leaders of the game actually believe this, the facade that everyone is equal in the game, of course there's absolutely a power imbalance.
Absolutely.
You know, it's just like, I mean, that's the whole point.
Right.
You have the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
So,
and and on top of that, I just wanted to add that, like, saying they had disturbed the equality or the egalitarian environment of the game, even though ultimately, if we look at what they were doing, I'm not here to defend organ harvesters by any means. I just want to say
that's a weird position to be in.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
That despite everything they did, all that they did was take these bodies that a lot of them were still alive, so, you know, I'm not going to give them that much slack.
Yeah.
But taking people that were already eliminated from the game, people that had already had their fate sealed, that otherwise probably would have just been stuck in the incinerator, theoretically, and kind of did this thing to them, which was horrible and a huge violation of human rights. But it doesn't have anything to do directly with the game itself. It's the principle of the game and the principle of equality and egalitarianism, which I think in its own way is a great statement about capitalism or society, if you want to, you know, say that, where it's like, it's not so much about are they actually making people's lives worse or harder or doing something that impacts the people who are still alive or still trying, but rather did they violate it in principle?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, a lot more than you would think of, you know, kind of a Netflix binge-worthy kind of, again, sci-fi dystopian kind of show. So, so obviously we both really liked it.
Oh my God,
liked it so far. So how do you think it plays from a freshness perspective in terms of like some of the new ideas which have been introduced? Because I kind of touched on the fact where it's like, you know, there are definitely echoes of things which I've seen before as the older nerd, but a lot of them tweaked in fun, interesting ways. How does that look from your perspective? How fresh does it feel? Yeah,
honestly, it feels pretty fresh. Weirdly enough, I find myself comparing it to like, I would say that if I were to compare it to Hunger Games and give you a good idea of why I think it's fresher.
Which I've never seen because...
Really?
I've never seen, I've never read it. Again, I think it's one of those things where it's like, you know, I was way past that stage when it came out. You know, it was considered young adult kind of thing. And I saw it and I'm like, again, as an old nerd, it's like, I've been here before.
Right.
And... you know, if someone... I wouldn't turn it off if someone put it in front of me, but I wouldn't go and seek it out.
The Hunger Games books, I would say, are better than the Hunger Games movies. I think that's kind of a universal sentiment, as well with many books and movies. Suzanne Collins is a phenomenal author. She does a great job of explaining this kind of dystopian society, as well as sort of like unearthing a lot of the emotions and ideas that would come along with growing up in that kind of society.
Right.
I think she does create a world and a lot of things that are very unique, but you're right. It does smack of a lot of the old tropes. And something that I think is interesting is that the Hunger Games movies were coming out of the 2000s and the 2010s, and they were trying to create something that was an action movie, essentially. Which works, of course, and I think Squid Game is also and could be considered like an action type of thing.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
I would honestly consider it more of a drama, but, you know.
Yeah, a psychological drama.
Oh, definitely, and a thriller, for sure. But the Hunger Games, I think, was this kind of intense action movie that... like, they were trying to shoot it like an episode of Lost. Versus, like, nowadays... and this, I think, has to do a lot with the change in the medium. We have Netflix now, which creates, you know, this ability to have, instead of just having a movie to try and get everything out there, you can have...
get a series or a mini-series.
Right, a serial television show with, you know, 50-minute episodes, and you get 12 of them, and you can just do them all in one go.
Right, exactly.
And I think that has lent itself to being a little bit more artistic with how people put together things. I know you've watched a couple of Netflix shows that have been particularly.
Yeah, I personally think with all the things in Squid Games that they're trying to kind of pack in there, yeah, absolutely. A series format works better than a movie format would.
Yeah.
And of course, with a series format, there's the possibility of more seasons.
Right.
Which, of course, being the obsessive going down the rabbit hole kind of guy I am, I checked into, and it's been talked about.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, I'd be interested to see if it's something that they can make multiple seasons out of. I know they've done it before and tried to do it before with other shows. Stranger Things comes to mind, where it started with a really knockout first season that kind of seemed like its own thing. And then they proceeded to make additional seasons to sort of,
Well, I will say that, again, without giving away the game, the end of Squid Game, especially like the last shot, you're going to be like slack-jawed, like, what the fuck?
Oh, right.
And like in a good way, though, like and also in a way like, oh, I want to know what happens now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, I love that. I love the tease, and I can appreciate a good setup for something new.
Yeah.
Which actually, weirdly, I would say Stranger Things also kind of did. At the end, they have this little shot where the kid that they just got back, Will, I believe, is the one who gets kidnapped. He's like in his bathroom and he starts coughing up this like black goop, and you're like, oh no, it's the monster,
right,
something.
Or it's, the
and it's
upside
like,
down.
Right, exactly. It's that like one last compelling shot. And I have to be honest, I haven't seen Stranger Things seasons 2 and 3, but I know they're very successful.
Well, let's not get too far in the weeds in that.
Absolutely.
Then. Yeah.
That being said, I think the format really lends itself because you have a more, I would say, artsy kind of vibe to Squid Game. There's a lot of really long, almost Kubrick-esque shots. There's these beautiful sets that have been constructed very intricately with colors that are very deliberate. The Escher stairs that they kind of have for that like midway point between the games and the...
I gotta say that set design with those MC Escher-esque candy-colored stairs and the shots of the people walking up and down them. I mean, that's just such an artistic shot. And it's also, to me, it's kind of funny, too, because it does remind you of certain other things.
Yeah.
The MC Escher graphics and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think that's very clever.
It is. Yeah. And something that reminds me of those candy colors, as well as the fact that all the games they play are children's games, is the weird sense of infantilization you get the whole time you're watching, where you almost feel as though these players are being infantilized and treated like children, because they are quite literally being controlled. They're being herded and shepherded everywhere. They're playing kids' games.
Right, and you have primary colors and shapes, the PlayStation masks or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
As I've heard them described.
I'd say that's,
stuff like that.
Yeah, no.
So, I mean, it's really great. And I think they did a really good job with the performances as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Ji-hoon, I think is...
yes, Gi-hoon, Ji-hoon.
456, player 456.
Yes.
He really makes a compelling focus to me, especially because when they first introduce him, he is not a likable character.
Oh my God, no! You meet him and you're like, dude, this guy sucks.
Yeah,
he's taking money from his mom. He doesn't remember his kid's birthday.
Right. I mean, and as a dad, I'm like, you're doing this all wrong, dude.
Yeah.
It's like you're absolutely doing it wrong. But as the series goes on, he and all the other characters who initially might start out as kind of unlikable definitely reveal themselves to have more layers, and you wind up rooting for him, and you find likable things about almost all of them.
Right.
Even the thuggish guy who gets together with the crazy lady.
Yes, and, 101 and 212.
Yes.
Yep.
And I'm sorry because I don't know all the Korean names.
Oh, no, you're good. I'm only barely there, so,
So, we're just stupid Americans.
It's interesting because I think they even set it up so that some characters you start by rooting for them. Like, I would argue Song-woo is one of those characters.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you're like, oh my God, this guy, like, he's clearly down on his luck. He had so much going for him. And I think they make several choices, and at least where I'm at, he's kind of right now bit of a villainous character, bit of a heel.
Well,
but
yeah. We'll say total dick at this point. But he has layers as well.
Yeah.
Right. And he does make some sympathetic moves throughout the early episodes where it's kind of like okay, you could see yourself rooting for him. And when you thought that like Song-woo and Ali were going to team up together and have a chance to go forward, you're like, all right, that's a solid team, and you're rooting for both of them. And then the turnaround happens where they wind up competing against each other, and you're just fucking heartbroken.
Yeah, and Songwoo just chooses a very it's clever, all right, but it sure isn't great way of getting out of that game in which he tricks Ali, and it's so like unfortunate, but it's very compelling. And something that I like too about that is that the reason Squid Game also feels fresh to me is because Hunger Games takes that stance of more like, we need to freeze each of these characters as kind of a trope, and then they will develop as needed, or they will die, or whatever.
Right.
And you have the really aggressive guy who comes and tries to beat Katniss up, and then you've got the guy who falls in love with Katniss, and you've got the this and the that.
Well, I've never having seen Hunger Games, does it fall into kind of like the standard American action movie in the sense where it's like you have fairly clearly defined heroes and villains?
Yeah, I would say pretty much. There are definitely some characters that are a little bit, little column A, little column B, and Suzanne Collins does do a wonderful job in the books. I would say the movies are a little less good at that.
Well, yeah.
But,
I mean, that's the way movies are, and of course you have to get it for a certain runtime. Yeah, I mean, Squid Game, it's like all the characters definitely have faults, and they all definitely have high spots as well. You know, things that you're rooting for them for.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when it comes down to it, you don't want to see these people die.
Right.
Even though that's the whole point of the game and the whole point of the show to a certain extent.
Right. And I would say that in itself, that stressor of them being like, oh God, we're gonna die, it makes you sympathize a little more with them, because you the whole time are also like, well, I don't know what I would do in this situation. Right. I can't say I'd do better than you.
I think that kind of comes back to the acting as well, and of course the writing and the directing, the way it's set up, is because a lot of these people have legitimately understandable reactions to the situation that they find themselves in. You know, it's not like, one of them decides to go, all right, we're going to be heroes and we're going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Right.
There's a little bit of that, definitely. But there's some realistic, like, shock and sadness and panic reactions that are involved in it as well. So, and they spend a fair amount of time on the psychology of the players as they're playing the game, as you would expect, and as you would kind of feel yourself, as, God forbid you were trapped in a circumstance like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on top of that, something that I find interesting about the storytelling style of Squid Game, and particularly now that we know that the Squid Game is something that has gone on for many, many years, and is something that is over a long period of time, thanks to the efforts of our little detective friend.
Yes.
It gives this idea of less, we the audience, it's, what is it, dramatic irony when the audience knows something that the characters don't? I don't know.
I'm going to have to defer to my film major friends on that one.
For real. I want to say it's dramatic irony, but I can't remember for sure. But whichever one it is, it's that idea of like, we know what's going on, the players don't. And in some stories, you are rooting for the players because you think they're going to figure out what you know, but without the information that you, the reader, got. Just the information that they have as the character. But in Squid Game, at least from where I am, only a few characters have managed to make a chink in that armor. And only a few characters have managed to make any headway. And even the characters that have, you're scared for them the whole time. You have no hope in them, no faith in them. You're like,
they're definitely in a very powerless position.
Right. 67's going to fall out of the vents and into that kitchen and die. And that detective is going to get found and shot. And it's all going to go downhill. But they don't. They just keep coming back. And I think that's one of those really compelling things.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask you this, because I've seen the whole thing and you have not. Now I'll say that you'll definitely get some questions answered.
Yeah.
Some definitely will not be.
Nice.
I don't think that's giving it away to tell you. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think happens in the next 3 episodes? First of all, who do you think wins?
Who do I think wins? So I think in my heart, I know it's probably going to be like, well, actually, I don't know. I think I thought it was going to be Gi-hun because he's the main character, and there's a big part of you that's like, well, he's the main character. But also, I've seen enough of Squid Game to know that they would not hesitate to kill off their main character. Would they do it before the finale? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think they would, but also, who's to say? Okay. That being said, I think 67 is a good like pen-in to win, just because she's young, she's the attractive female character, and a lot of times if they don't die off very quickly, they get used as kind of the sacrificial lamb of they get to win, but at what cost?
Right. Right.
And, you know, she's young. She has a very noble motivation, I think. And, you know, a lot of what she's going for is not her fault or not in any way. Though, admittedly, I will say, I don't know if Squid Game would necessarily want to award that narratively, because if by awarding that narratively you create this implication that the only people deserving to win are those with noble motivations, which I don't think Squid Game necessarily believes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen so far that it's like, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions here.
Yeah.
And also that, you know, there is a bit of a feeling of like, you know, the randomness of the universe. Like, you know, the quote, deserving people don't necessarily get the rewards they deserve and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, and of course, I'm not going to give away any details. I just want to see what you think, and then we're going to revisit that once you've had a chance to watch all of it, and we'll see how accurate you were. So
I'm excited.
So we're saying tentatively at this point that you think 67 is the one who's going to make it all the way through.
Tentatively, I think Sae-byeok is going to be the winner.
Okay. What do you think is going to happen to the police officer?
The police officer, see, that's an interesting one, because right now we have this whole ongoing thread about him and his brother, right? And like how he's got his kidney, and like he knows his brother was in one of the Squid Games, but we don't know if he won or what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
I have this feeling that like he's either gonna die in a way that like is super like nobody knows he died, nobody knows he was there, nobody knows what happened to him, but his actions somehow help the people that are trying to do something.
Okay.
Or he survives and serves some kind of role as either like, and see, that's where I'm interested, because we also don't know that much about his motivations. We're only told that he's looking for his brother, he works for the police, and he's willing to give Gi-hyun the benefit of the doubt in terms of like his story about the island and the games.
Right.
You know, so I'm genuinely curious to find out what happens to him, but I think he's either going to die in a way that really helps the heroes that he is not really rewarded for, or he's going to like do a little heel turn, maybe become one of the bad guys. Or that he'll survive to the end and end up becoming a major catalyst in the events that kind of transpire. But I think I'd like to go with the first one as sort of my main prediction, which is that I think
he's going to die somehow, but either in his death or in his actions before his death, he's going to help the rest of the characters.
That's my in an
important way.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think there will be any other major revelations, or what kind of twists you see happening in the last few episodes?
God, I can't even fight. At this point, I'm so... Like, this show has just sent me reeling in so many different directions. The one that I thought of with Grace, when we were watching Grace, my girlfriend, for viewers, listeners, whatever, we were talking about how they take 212 away at the beginning of 212, the crazy lady.
Yeah.
They take her away at the beginning of the marbles game because she can't find a partner. Which we kind of later, I think, realize is sort of a blessing, because, you know, she then doesn't have to participate in that, you know, duel, basically.
Right.
That being said, I'm really curious to see what happens and what they do, because we've seen every other character death on screen very explicitly shown. They have killed characters in front of us the whole time that we've been here. Yeah. Even the most, like, dear to our heart, number one and 199 have just right in front of us.
Right.
212 was not. She was brought off stage. They clearly made a show of bringing her out, and also mentioning before the game to the main proctor of the games that they didn't have an even number anymore because they'd killed the organ harvesting doctor.
Right.
So my thoughts are that she is going to be somehow involved in one of the upcoming games as like an opponent or some kind of proctor, maybe it's a game where, you know, everybody else has to do something that she tells them to do, or it's just her versus everybody else kind of thing, you know? Which I think would be fitting, because we've seen that she's kind of this antagonistic character that a lot of people don't like, or at least they only pretend to like her. And I think putting her in that position would ultimately make it like a standoff type of thing. Okay. So that's my prediction.
Okay. All right. Very interesting prediction. I will say that her absence from that game is addressed.
Okay.
I will not say anything more than that.
All right.
And then we'll see how that dovetails with your theory.
Yeah.
When we revisit this.
All right. I'm excited, genuinely.
Yeah. I definitely look forward to us coming back around.
Yeah.
Circling back around, talking a little bit more about that. Do you have any kind of final thoughts about what you've seen so far, or the greater context, or nerd versus nerd, or anything like that?
Nothing in particular. I think I'd just like to hear some of your like closing thoughts on like what you thought of it as a whole, probably if you can do it with no spoilers, and sort of like what sort of analogs it pulled for you, if there were any like comparisons in media that you liked, or even things that you saw in the show that really surprised or excited you that you hadn't seen before, or maybe made an impact on you.
I do have to say that after having seen so many decades of violent movies and American television, I was much less affected by the gore and the deaths than I thought I might be because of all the advanced press. But I hate to say it, but I've seen so many people getting shot and blown up and stuff like that. It's like, it's almost like, all right, well, where'd you go? Whatever. This is happening again. We're going to get through this. And I don't think that's a good commentary on me on the way that,
it's accurate. It's 100%.
American media is and stuff like that. And trust me, there are definitely moments in here that actually do affect me, where it's like, oh my god, I can't believe they did that,
but it's less
like
on a gore level sometimes, and more on the emotional level. They shoot 199 and you're not upset because they shot him in the head, you're upset because they shot him in the head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, even like the famous red light, green light thing, where this is the first time they start shooting people. I kind of knew I think we all kind of knew what was going on just by the advanced press, what was going to happen when they started this. So when that started happening, I wasn't so amazingly affected by that. Stuff. A lot less than I thought I would be.
Definitely.
That said, your mother could never watch this show.
Oh, God, no. Yeah, and I know there are a lot of people that, like, my mom included, because, she would just be like, oh, and reasonably
she'd be gripping my arms, and I'd have scars in my arms where her nails had dug in. But that said, maybe that's a failing of me, but ultimately I think what that helped me do is it helped me get past the shock value that I think that they were trying to get across, and really be able to focus more on what it was they were trying to say, or some of the nuances of the performances, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm not going to be like 100% enthusiastic about this. It wasn't Ibsen. This isn't a David Mamet play or something like that. But I think it's very well done for what it is, and very entertaining, and some very compelling performances to kind of anchor things. And it's like, again, I kind of both identified and was horrified by Ji Jun. Gi Jun, just because the way he was as a father, and the way he was as a human being, but the fact that ever since getting involved with the game, he's really tried to be positive and pull everybody together. He makes for a very good focus for a character.
Agreed. In fact, it's interesting. I don't want to prolong it too much, but I do like that you brought that up, just because I think Gi-hun is a great character for like showing that sometimes people can be good people that are tempted by vices, and they have things in their lives that they don't have a lot of mental control over, things like a gambling addiction, or doing certain things that maybe aren't right. People do things that aren't right all the time, and it's not because they're always bad people, but because good people make bad decisions. And once Gi-hun is put into the game and is like separated from his vices to the extent that he's like basically in an isolated facility, you see him become a slightly better person, because he doesn't. Oh, that's
interesting, right? And I hadn't thought about that angle. The fact that he is indeed, it's like a forced isolation from his vices, so he has to act differently.
Yeah, you see more of his true self than you see of the version of him that is like struggling with everything around him. His environment. Yeah, so I don't know. It's really interesting to like hear all those things, because you've brought up some great points about the acting is phenomenal, and the writing, and just how sometimes like you do get so caught up in the action and stuff of modern movies that you forget how lovely an experience where it is really cinematic and thought out can be.
Yeah. And one thing I am going to mention, one last thing, the music I think is on point.
The music of of Squid Game,
just great.
It uses a lot of really great little high pitched tones like xylophones and like bells that are very like childlike but haunting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. really good stuff.
Oh,
so
just
if they come
phenomenal.
out with a soundtrack for that,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be all over it.
Oh yeah, you'll have to.
Yeah.
It's funny, there's one specific scene that I'm thinking of. It's the one where Gi-hoon gets and goes to the Squid Game for the second time, the one where the detective like follows the van, and they use it's one of the tracks that's like really intense, and I remember thinking they play it as they're like knocking all the contestants out and like pumping in the gas.
Gassing everybody.
It's such an intense track, but that scene would not be the same without it. There is such a specific way that the like staccato of the beats are, and the way that it like drills in this very heavy but kind of like lulling tone, until you're just like you're on edge, but you don't know why, because it's a very like calm scene,
Yeah, that's
just
that's
so
a
good.
really, really good point. And you're gonna have to go back and look at that one.
Yeah.
And there is one scene where I think the way that they shoot it and the music just really, really makes it great for me, but that's in episode 7.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
we'll talk about that next time.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll keep an eye out for it. I'll see if I can't like guess which scene you're talking about.
See what you look at and see it's definitely a scene where both cinematography and music work together to give it a very cool but also really intense vibe.
Ooh.
So
see, I'm all for that. I'm excited.
So I think that's it. Squid Game Part 1.
Squid
we had a
Game
chance
Part
to talk
1.
about it. We kind of covered a number of different things while still being all over the map. So
Little here, little there. You know how it rolls in this house.
that's right, baby. Now it's time for
Stump the Dad, Stump the Dad, Stump the Dad, yeah!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of Stump the Dad.
This time we're actually stumping the dad instead of the
time
dad doing the stumping.
That's true. Oh, it's a reverse stump.
The old reverse stump. Haven't seen this one in a while. See if we can pull it off.
All right, let's pull off your stump if we could.
All right.
So, Cal, why don't you explain exactly what it is we're going to be doing and take it from there.
All right. So growing up, I was very into a certain subculture that I'm sure if you're anywhere near the nerdy side of anything, you'll probably have heard of. That subculture was known as Homestuck. Homestuck was a long-running online webcomic by a man named Andrew Hussey, and it followed the progression of this like video game these kids were playing that ends the world, and they have to play this game to create a new one. And it was very long, convoluted.
You've explained it or tried to explain it to me several times, and I've got some of it, but some of it I'm like, what the? Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely it's frankly beyond explanation in some points.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a cult. Almost.
I would say very much so. We all paint our skin gray, dress up in convoluted costumes, gather in large groups at conventions, have weird chants. It's lessened over the years, but I would say it fits the bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, Homestuck is super weird and super all over the place. So today I've compiled a couple of things from Homestuck that definitely did happen, and one thing that definitely didn't happen. These are all serious plot points that I'll be reading to you today, things that directly and probably pretty majorly impacted the story of Homestuck. So you'll have to guess for me which of these things is a real thing, or I'm sorry. You'll have to guess for me which of these things is not a real thing that happened, and which of the three are real things that happened.
Okay,
So,
I'll put my thinking cap on.
All right.
So let's give this a shot.
sounds good. You're free to ask me any questions if you want to try and grill me to make me slip up or anything like that.
Okay.
So let's get started.
Okay.
All right, so the first thing that happened in Homestuck.
Right.
A character must teleport his own decapitated head into the past, so his best friend can passionately kiss him atop an erupting volcano. This is done to resurrect the decapitated friend's other body, which then appears riding a sick hoverboard. All right?
Well, we're off to quite a start. All right.
It only goes downhill from here.
Right.
All right, so the next one for you. The Mafia-owned soap factory on the alien planet has a critical malfunction and begins to fill the underground tunnels in which the aliens live and sleep with soap, which causes an allergic reaction that kills not one, not two, but 5 major characters, one of whom returns as a soapy ghost merged with the spirit of Colonel Sanders and one of the main character's beloved childhood teddy bears. Betty Crocker, who is a huge alien fish woman, elects the Insane Clown Posse and Guy Fieri to leadership roles as presidents of the United States and the world, respectively.
Was that the third one?
That was the third one,
Okay.
yes. And then finally, for your fourth one, partway through, Homestuck switches to an entirely different story about a mob made entirely up of pool ball-based gangsters. This story ties in later, as it turns out the leader of the mob, a cue ball with a human body, has been harassing the alien characters who are children over the internet.
Oh, dear God. Wow. Okay, if 3 of those are real, this thing is more fucked up than even I thought.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and it goes so much deeper. I tried to pick ones that were kind of surface level stuff I didn't have to explain too in depth.
So I'm just gonna ask you this.
Yeah.
When taken as a whole,
Yeah.
Is there any kind of coherence to this whole thing, or is it kind of like an Axe Cop kind of thing where it's just barely held together by the thinnest connective tissue of logic?
You know, that's the thing. I would love to say it's the first one, and I probably would have several years ago.
Yeah.
It is so much just kind of an Axe Cop crazy flurry of nonsense. And you know what? It works. It's fun, and there's a lot of it that does, frankly, kind of make sense and has some compelling stuff. But for the most part, it's just super goofy and all over the place, and that's part of what makes Homestuck so fun.
Okay, so let's begin the process of elimination.
Yes.
Okay, I'm pretty sure number 3
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
Because I seem to have a vague memory of you talking about this before.
Yeah.
With the Betty Crocker and the Insane Clown Posse. Now, you could just very well be doing what I've done in my editions of Stump the Dad, wherein you're taking a few salient details and mashing them together in a way which they did not actually occur, but seem similar enough to something which actually did occur, in that I can be fooled. But you know what? I'm going to say number 3.
Yeah.
I think is true.
I think you are correct. Number 3 is true. Betty Crocker is a huge fish alien, and she did elect Guy Fieri and the Insane Clown Posse to be the leaders of the United States and the world, respectively.
As one does.
This serves as the catalyst for like an entire act in which we see some grown-up characters try to fight the Insane Clown Posse and win, and then try to find the witch, or try to fight Betty Crocker and lose.
Okay, so side question about that is that, do they actually use the likenesses or anything of the Insane Clown Posse? Do you have any idea if the Juggalos like signed off on this or anything?
I wouldn't say they signed off on it, but I think if they read it, they'd probably be like, yeah, this is hilarious. It's very much within their wheelhouse, and they just kind of do use their likenesses. They're just basically JPEGs that he like cuts out and then puts into that kind of very stark MS Paint style that everything else is in.
Okay.
So it's very goofy, but you know.
Okay, all right. And side note,
Sure.
I met a couple of actual Juggalos who came to the Comedy Shrine. Some of the nicest guys I've ever met.
Very true.
You know,
yeah.
they just want to do their thing.
Yeah, whatever the Juggalos are doing, you know, good for you, man. Yeah, they're up to something cool.
Okay, so number 4. Now that was the thing. Remind me, read that one again for me.
Yeah, partway through, Homestuck switches to an entirely different story about a mob made up entirely of pool ball-based gangsters. This story ties in later, as it turns out, the leader of the mob, a cue ball with a human body, has been harassing the alien characters who are children over the internet.
Okay, I'm also going to say that this one is true, if only because I know that you have described to me times wherein there was like a total reset of the whole Homestuck story, and, you know, again, things were just absolutely changed or restarted, and then, you know, I'm assuming somehow they kind of tied in with the earlier part of it at some point, maybe not, I don't know. But I'm gonna say that part is true as well. I don't know if you want to tell me I'm right now, or if you want to save it until I've had a crack at the other 2.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I'll tell you, you are correct. That one is also true.
Jesus.
That way these last 2 kind of come down to a one or the other sort of situation, which I think is cool. But yes, that last one is entirely true. They're called the Felt. And they have a leader that is a cue ball, and the 8 ball is a woman named Snowman, who has like weird supernatural powers. I don't know.
Because
they all kind of do.
Because of course she does.
Because of course she
Right.
does. But they're
Okay.
very funny. My favorite character of the Felt is, I believe his name is Biscuits. He can travel through time 1 minute per 1 minute. So he gets inside of his oven that he has, and he sets the timer for how long he wants to travel forward in time. And then he gets in the oven, and he waits for the timer to go off, and then it goes off, and he gets out, and he's traveled in time.
Okay. Right, but he can only go forward,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Only forward, and only 1 minute per minute.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So.
I must have been listening to you at one point because I invented a superhero for my comedy podcast.
Oh, yeah?
With that exact same power. Can travel through time at the rate of 1 minute per minute.
Incredible.
So then refresh me then on the first 2
Yes.
points, if you would.
All right, so here are the first 2 for you. A character must teleport his own decapitated head into the past so his best friend can passionately kiss him atop an erupting volcano. This is done to resurrect the decapitated friend's other body, which then appears riding a sick hoverboard.
Okay.
The Mafia-owned soap factory on the alien planet has had a critical malfunction and begins to fill the underground tunnels where the aliens live with soap, which causes an allergic reaction that kills not 1, not 2, but 5 major characters, one of whom returns as a soapy ghost merged with the spirit of Colonel Sanders and one of the main characters' childhood teddy bears.
Okay. All right. Doing a little bit of thinking about this, here's what I'm going to say, and I'll explain my reasoning, and then you
Yes.
can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. I'm going to say that the first one is not true,
Okay.
and that the second one is true.
All right.
Okay. And my thoughts on this were, okay, first of all, the second one contains the Mafia, which again I seem to remember being name checked in your description of this before, plus also Colonel Sanders, which again, random pop culture figuring into the mythos of this.
Yes.
And also killing off the main characters, probably not a problem in
Yeah.
something like this, which, you know,
Does it pretty routinely. Yeah.
from what you've told me. And then also just with the first one, the whole thing about him kissing his best friend's head, it's not the decapitated head thing which throws me off, but the slight homoerotic undertones which are kind of your stock in trade when you're creating things.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Got me when you got me.
So that's my guess. That's why
All
I guess
right.
that number 1 is false and number
Yeah.
2 is true.
All right. Unfortunately, I do have to tell you that number 1 is true and number 2 is false.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, you got me. Okay.
I got you just a little bit. You got the other ones. And you know what? Your reasoning is sound. But no, number 1 is entirely true. That entirely happens. It's one of the pivotal points of the, I believe, 5th act. Their names are Dirk and Jake. Dirk decapitates himself by putting a teleporter over his head that then only teleports his head and nothing else, thus decapitating him. And his friend has to kiss him to bring him back, and it's this whole thing. He's got this crush on this friend, so it's like the peak of their
Oh my
weird
God.
sort of pseudo
Okay.
relationship, and it's just this whole thing. But there is no soap factory. In fact, the aliens do not live underground. They live in things called hives. And the Mafia, while there is technically a Mafia involved in Homestuck, they're more like the dads of the aliens and less like trying to make illegal soap, you know?
So tell me then, did you throw in the Colonel Sanders pop culture reference or what
Yeah.
have you to kind of throw me off the trail?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
It is also technically, there are things in Homestuck called sprites. They are like ghosts, and they are like they help the players as they're trying to do their thing, and the players can merge objects with their sprite, so each of them has a sprite with some unique features, including one that is a dead childhood cat, a clown figurine, and like a princess hat, and it's like this goofy little like clown cat. It's got these like tentacle arms. I think it's like also part squid or something.
The more you describe this to me, the more that I'm upset that I never monitored your internet usage any more than I did. Because if this is the shit that you were getting into, it explains a lot about your personality and my parenting style, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, what did you expect, man? You'd walk into my room and just say nonsense words at me from the time I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Now I sit here, age 22, having been a homestar.
I could take responsibility, but I blame society.
Yeah, that's fair. It's society's fault.
So it sounds like then that I made it a few laps around the track, but didn't quite make it to the final hurdle. So well done.
Well, thank you.
Well done.
Well done to you as well. You've made some great points, and I think your final guess was pretty spot on, even if you didn't quite get it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Cal, for taking lead on that episode of Stump the Dad. And as always, this has been From X to Z. I'm Al Morgan.
And I'm Cal Morgan.
So please check us out again next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
From X to Z was written and hosted by Alan Morgan and Cal Morgan. From X to Z is a production of Memoriam Development.